And welcome, Linda. So we have a wonderful group of observers and contributors, and it's wonderful to have you all. I have asked Anne to put up for us at the beginning of the meeting an item on the Concord housing development on the housing public housing plan. What is it called? The housing plan. Anyway, I thought it was HPP, but I can't think what
the housing production plan.
Production plan. Thank you, dearly. Who know this by heart, because the very first item speaks to and I think she's going to put it up for us. And I just want us to
Diane, forgive me for interrupting, but should we introduce ourselves first?
Oh, excuse me. Thank God somebody has their wits about them. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, can we each start the meeting? Charles?
Here.
And you're appointed by?
Appointed by the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew Boardman, Planning Board.
Thank you, Nancy.
Nancy Nelson, Historical Commission appointee.
Dear Sarah, who's
Sarah Grimwood, Natural Resources Committee appointee.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul Baum, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you, Eve.
Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Thank you, John.
John Kratzley, excuse me, Select Board appointee.
And Burton?
Burton Flint, Select Board appointee. Thanks.
Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee, and I do declare that we have a full committee meeting this evening. Now, Anne will put up on the screen for us the very initial item, one of the initial items on the housing production plan. And I want us to note that there is a reference to the fact, and this is not it, so I'm sure she'll scroll down so we can see it. It's in the very beginning of the plan that the Community Preservation Act, CPA funds, will continue to be important resources to preserve existing units. This will continue to be an important function to ensure that existing affordable units are not converted to market rate units, and in the process are removed from the town's affordable housing stock and the state subsidized housing inventory. Other sources of funding for affordable housing are the American Rescue Plan, ARAP, and HONE funds. Well, it's important to note that, and Anne, could you pull it down a little bit so we can see the paragraph that is a little bit higher than this? There it is. Providing funding support for the Concord Housing Development Corporation to create and preserve existing affordable units. In past years, the CHDC has worked with the town, and they have indeed highly, to set CPA funding on a nearly annual basis, which assists with preserving existing affordable housing units, subject to older restrictions that allow their resale at well above current affordable levels. Should affordability be at risk with previously appropriated CPA funds, the Concord Housing Development Corporation is poised to preserve existing affordable units. Concord housing entities, such as the Trust or CHDC, intend to continue to purchase higher priced units when they turn over to preserve these variable rates of affordability. Then if you go down a little bit further to item 17, it says, re-examine using the borrowing powers, and I want us to underscore that word in our minds here, of the Community Preservation Act to fund a larger affordable housing project. Since 2006, the Community Preservation Committee has appropriated a total of $27.1 million across all CPA with 22% spent toward community housing per the 2020 CPA plan. In 2021, the town funded an update to the housing production plan, participation in the Regional Housing Services Program, and an affordable housing buy-down program. I'm not reading the numbers, obviously. In 2022, $300,000 that were funded were used towards the acquisition of a 1-acre Assabet Bluff property for community housing. At various points, the CPA has considered using its borrowing powers for affordable housing, but has never exercised that ability. I have to tell you that I do not recall us ever discussing that in the last 5 years. I would defer to John Kratzley and to Burton, who have been on the committee longer than I, and they may be able to tell us whether we ever really did discuss this. This may be an opportune time, given the town's likely drop below 10% on the state SHLL in May 2023, to actually use the borrowing power. Now, given the amount of borrowing the town is doing right now, and given the cost of the middle school buildings and all sorts of things, this seems to me a most improbable comment on number 17. And it also, I would just add, was not something with which anybody conferred with us. Ann Clifford was never conferred. I was never conferred. No one on the committee, to my knowledge, was ever kind of noted that this was there. Now, what we do about this, first, let me just hear general comments from people. And then I'm not sure what we do, but I do think we need to be aware of this and see, kind of how we proceed or what we say. Eve, you want to start us? Thank you.
Yeah, just a simple question. How does that work? About borrowing from the CPC?
Well, it's only, you only borrow to, and listening to Ann Clifford in the background here, monitoring my accuracy, Eve, but you only do this to support efforts that the town is making. So that if the town wanted to build let's say they wanted to do something on Junction Village, and they wanted to take a great deal of free cash and other things and build in Junction Village, we could borrow some money to help support that if it were beyond our means in terms of our housing money. We would have to apply for that. It's a state money grant. It's a rather elaborate process, but we could do that. But we certainly, to my knowledge, have never entertained doing that.
I didn't understand like the logistics of being a committee of people. Is it borrowing on behalf of the town?
Borrowing on behalf of the state agency, the state itself, the CPC, is an organization that has resources. We could turn to them and say we would like to borrow from them to help improve the amount of money that we might give to a project, but it has to be a town-initiated project that we would be supporting, not one that we would in fact develop on our own. And in typical fashion, we'd need to evaluate it very carefully, Eve, as we do most projects. Sarah.
So just to make sure I understand, so we would borrow from the CPA, from the state CPA fund,
Right.
And presumably would then get less funding in following years as we pay it back, or is that how it?
Know how that part of it works, Sarah.
Okay.
I've never entertained anything like that, even though the language of the housing production plan says that we have. So I'm not sure. We'd have to look into those details. I was rather surprised. I read the whole housing production plan very carefully over the holiday, kind of sentence by sentence and word by word. And I have to say, I was taken aback and rather astonished. We have never, to my knowledge, discussed it. And we certainly have not entertained that. Now, it doesn't mean we can't, but I don't think we have. Paul.
Is that borrowing power limited to the housing category?
Yes, it's limited to the housing category. It has to do with affordable housing.
Okay.
Lynn, I see you're on screen. I think you probably know something would like to add.
I can say that Stuart Saginaw, the previous committees have at least been exposed to this concept. Stuart Saginaw wasn't invited in one year and did talk to the committee about how this has worked, and some surrounding towns have used this option. I'm not sure the mechanism for borrowing is quite. I don't want to speak to the details of that. There may be some other comments that need to be made there, but I can say that those surrounding communities who have used this to fund a rather large project, which a one-year allocation or even a couple successive years is not sufficient to do the job. Once they do borrow that money, then the debt service for that money would come out of future
CPC funds.
CP funds on an annual basis.
Right.
Now, I'm disturbed to hear that this current committee has not had the benefit of this discussion prior to this appearing in the housing production plan draft. I do know that some of the individuals on the steering committee who are helping draft this housing production plan probably have had some direct experience. And so it may be with borrowing in other towns.
Borrowing in other towns, okay.
Right. I guess that's the best update I can give you at this point.
Thank you.
But it has been considered by a previous, at least at an educational level, by previous CPC groups.
Thank you very much. John, do you remember it ever?
I do not remember
Yeah.
this concept. It's unfamiliar to me.
Yeah.
One
Yes,
thing,
I have read about it, John, because I've read, you know, the CPC stuff and the CPC Act, and I've seen that it's there. But I guess the reason I mention this is that, and I'm sorry that I have not had a chance to get to Stuart Saginaw. Our life has been turned upside down, but any number of things, not the least of which in for the next 4 days, we won't be in this house because our whole heating system is being revamped because of problems. So we've been a little bit on the, on the discombobulated side on this end. So I've not had a chance to do the deep dive that I would like to. I just wanted to alert everyone to that. And if you, with your permission, I will speak to the housing production plan people and say that this is not something that that anybody in the last, John, how long have you been on the committee? 8 years?
Well, I was a planning board rep for a while,
Right.
and then yeah, maybe 6.
Maybe
So,
6
but I saw Nancy's hand go up. Do you remember this?
No, I don't remember it, but I remember seeing some, as I was reviewing materials for tonight's meeting, I read something about it. I may have been just flipping back through the legislation, or I may have seen it in the CPC plan or the policies and procedures, whatever Ann's called that. So we actually may have a reference to that in the plan.
Well, there, yeah, that exactly, Nancy. I mean, if you
Okay. Yeah.
if you do a comprehensive look through all of the various documents that guide the CPC,
Yeah.
you know, there is this possibility, but
I don't remember.
I'm a little alarmed that we were never even approached on this. And I don't want to sound, you know, prissy and affronted at all, but I would like to know why they felt, you know, what their thinking was that governed that particular language in the article. Andrew?
one thing that's there is information on the community preservation organization, whatever this coalition's website about bonding.
Yes, there is.
The example they give is not restricted to housing, though. It's just literally anything that you can't pay for right now. So it's just worth mentioning that their example on they shows a case study was actually purchasing a summer camp in Sharon. It had nothing to do with housing. So there's that to just keep in mind as this discussion goes on.
Paul,
and I know that they're accepting comments and are making revisions based on feedback. So I don't think any offense was probably made. It's just, I know they're working a bunch of plans for a bunch of towns now. So likely it was just something that was put in by accident.
Right. Andrew, that's the reason I'm saying I'm not trying to exercise a kind of hubris and self-importance, but I do think we need to respond to it in some way. And therefore I wanted to hear the wisdom of this committee as we exercise some sort of response, because what I was taken aback by was the fact that the notion that we had considered this in the past. Lee, you have a good perspective on this before we go to Paul. Can you tell us what you're thinking?
I do. I'm actually on the steering committee for the HPP.
There you go. You mean you're the one that did this?
I am not. Thank you. No, it's my understanding that the consultants that we're working with have drafted most of the text in it and accepted suggestions and changes, et cetera. So that's where I think the source of it was. You know, I think they do these for a lot of towns, and the concept is really based in the text of the CPA statute as well. I can't recall. I assume you have your own bylaw as well. So it's probably in there just authorizing that authority. And without speaking for the consultants, you know, I assume it's the attempt really is just to flag this as an authority and a resource as the town considers how to deal with affordable housing going forward. Next, as someone mentioned, I believe the select board is looking at the next revision on Monday. So any comments on that point or any other point throughout the whole document, probably the best way to have those received in time is just to email them to Liz Rust. And she has a conflict at 7, but I expect that she's going to join around 7:30 if you have any additional questions for her. And then lastly, I just want to make clear that CHTC has not addressed this issue in any of its meetings and certainly hasn't taken a position on it. So
Thank you.
but I appreciate all your comments.
Thank you so much, Lee. I wanted to say that my understanding is that we have until December 5th. And that is
That's Monday.
To make any comments, although my experience with the select board is if you really wish to have a comment in any way absorbed, you need to do it well before that. So that would be this Thursday at the very latest, this Friday at noon. And that's the reason I bring this up, because I think we should comment. I'm just not sure, what the tone ought to be or how we do this. So Paul?
Yeah, 2 comments. First, I want to thank Andrew for clarifying. So the borrowing power, it's
right.
But in the context of the present discussion, I think the wording the wording was a little leading as opposed to factual. The existence of this borrowing power is one thing, but the suggestion that that the CPC should use that, it should use it, seemed a little leading. So I don't remember the exact wording on it, but maybe we can just tone down, make it less of leading the witness and more of a factual commentary.
Paul, that was precisely my sentiment, was that rather than making the presumption that this is something we would of course exercise or do, to say that it is something we can consider. There is a process for doing so, but that we have not considered doing so in any serious way in the past. I mean, I just would like to, I'd like to get this on the record as best we can.
Right. The document suggested that we do so.
That's exactly right.
And it probably shouldn't, I don't know, should tone it slightly differently.
My sentiments precisely. Mike Lawson, hello.
Hello, like Lee, I'm on the steering committee too. I think that
Oh, 2 of you. I'm just teasing. Go ahead.
We're here to help.
I think Lee's explanation was correct. I think this was generated by the consultants, but I think your response would be very helpful to the housing production plan folks. So I wouldn't hesitate at all to weigh in.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Lee. And Paul, thank you for your good guidance. Why don't I write some language that is a little more cautious and send it around for everybody? And I have to do it very quickly, so watch your email, please. And I'm going to be in the midst of, I have no idea where I'm going to be because we may not have any heating in the house tomorrow. It's a little confusing here. So from some device, I will be sending you a note with some wording that would ask them to change the nature of that wording. And if you all approve of that, I will ask you to respond very quickly. And if there's approval of that or emendation of that language, that's also just fine. And get it back to me very quickly. Would that be okay with everybody?
Yes.
So I will send it out tomorrow at some point. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Mike and Lee, for adding to all of this, and Linda for your historical experience and perspective. Okay, now to the regular meeting and a review of the current applications. There is, in fact, a new application from CHDC. And I don't know if we want to start with that, the Assabet Bluff Housing Project, CHDC. So let's start with that. They have gone from applying for $100,000 to $500,000. And if you remember, we invited that change. I mean, this is not something that they've just done with kind of greedy avarice and saying, aha, but this is something we realized was an opportunity to do something in a rather exceptional way. So can we put that application up for people to look at it, please? I'm sure you've all read it, but if you haven't had a minute to. And of course, Lee is here, which is brilliant. And he says Liz is going to join us. Lee, would you like to present this, please?
Sure. First, I'd like to characterize it as maybe an amended or revised application rather than a new application.
I didn't mean to suggest it was new. Thank you.
Okay. And the reason for the revision is really the unexpected and somewhat urgent need for affordable housing projects to advance in the town, given the recent termination of the Christopher Heights at Junction Village project. I believe we submitted the original version of the application on September 16th, which I think was, a few weeks or a few months before Junction Village fell apart. So what's transpired between then and now is really the reason for the additional requests, as well as your committee's encouragement. So long story short, we're asking for $500,000. At the bottom, there's a rough budget. What I'll point out is even $500,000 plus the $50,000 we're getting from the Housing Foundation probably won't be enough to do this entire project. I'll just say further that, as we get further down the road with the whole project, we'll be revising these estimates and including timeframes and project schedules and things like that to further refine it. But just in the interest of time, we wanted to submit this for your consideration. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So we have no one particularly assigned to this, but I know we all are conscientious and I'm sure we all read it ahead of time. So can I hear comments from our committee or questions for Lee, please? Paul, you want to start us? Thank you.
Oh, it's more a question for the committee. So we are recouping, clawing back funds from the Christopher Heights project. Are we, and that those funds are not yet part of our available funding.
Not at all.
So would we would be funding this out of the 1.8 million, which is currently available, right? Okay, so even though the rationale here is that money's coming back, we have to fund this out of the available funds out of this year's funding.
Well, that's right. I maybe I misunderstood what Lee said, but I don't think it's about money coming back so much as the fact that it was stopped. The Concord Junction project was stopped, and therefore the need for cash right now to get some things started. And you can see by the project that it's not just it's 406 Old Marlborough Road. There's an updated new construction on the Assabet River Bluff area. So you can see that what it really does is give them some additional monies when everything comes together to be able to.
No, I understand. I'm just asking. We're considering this application as part of the available funds and the budgets, as opposed to the, I'll call it the clawback from Junction Village. Right.
Yes, it is. It's actually it is the precipitant, but it is not it's not a source of the funding.
Right. Got it.
Right.
Thank you very much. That's good clarification, John.
So just a question, Lee. Do you expect, should this be funded, that the renovation at 406 and the new construction would proceed simultaneously?
I think the renovation, well, the renovation is a function of tenancy. Right now, one of the two units is vacant, so we've already begun improvements in that unit. And we're not going to start looking at the second unit as a future affordable unit and get in probably to do renovations that would be disruptive to the tenant until she vacates, and we have no timetable for that. One exception might be like a roof or a new heating system, something like that. But what this really is an acceleration of this project now that Junction Village has gone away. So we were always going to need these funds, but we're just asking for them now in light of the termination of Junction Village. And it is important to just keep separate the Junction Village funds that are being reallocated to your committee, and then maybe in the spring to the trusts if town meeting goes along. And these funds, which are just really part of your CPA application process that would have that did happen. We just originally applied for the 100, now we're just upping it. So it's really two separate subjects, I guess.
Thank you very much. Eve.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for the committee and a question for Lee. For the committee, I haven't seen any evidence as to what the funds, sorry, let me start over. When we designate funds for a project like this, is there any constraints on what they can be used on in the when it's other than it's under housing? Does it matter what part of a housing project is funded?
I'll answer that to the best of my ability and then turn to others who may have wiser responses than I do, Eve. We have funded everything from digging, digging to building to refining. I mean, the whole arc of affordable housing has been something in which we have funded. And sometimes you see that, for instance, not just in historic preservation, where we've done things, you know, the whole arc, but when we have looked at projects where, you know, we knew that a particular building was going to be used for affordable housing, maybe hadn't been before, and that's required any number of things that needed to be done.
Okay. In that case, Lee, I wonder, why don't you just put, would it be possible for you to put a dollar per square foot cost on those construction numbers and get those in there on the budget, so that you could probably, and this is just born of pure ignorance here, but I wonder if you could extrapolate from previous projects what proportion of the funding ended up being, and then use that proportion on the construction cost. So if it's $350 a square foot, you know, the funding could be for just 100 per square foot, just so that people feel comfy, as opposed to the TBD there. And this is just based on having watched like a million Zoom videos of various meetings in the past couple of weeks, trying to catch up with what happened with Junction Heights. And I think that it's, you know, the more transparency that's available, the better, I suppose. So if you said, you know, construction required before developer selection, I think that you're probably know enough to be able to say what portion could be applied to construction now, what the construction costs would be of 4 houses, right?
Well,
we don't know that as of today, but that is, you know, one of the upcoming steps. So right now we're working on the site concept, where the houses might go and what the massing might look like. Then we're going to receive public input through, you know, one or more meetings, see what the community thinks about it. And then once everyone's comfortable with that, you know, site plan, then we can start soliciting developers, and we have to have their input. And, you know, in general, just to have a better cost, a more accurate cost per square foot. And as you probably know, the construction industry in general, the economics of that have been so out of whack over the last few years. It's really hard to look at a prior project and, you know, we could come up with something, but we're hoping to have an actual professional construction estimator come on into the project and give us those hard numbers based on current circumstances. And
I completely understand. We're doing preliminary estimates these days that are just based on best guesses of the current conditions of construction in the past year, that can put people to ease that something is either, you know, some hundreds, like 250,000 versus 750,000. So
right.
I wasn't suggesting that you come up, I understand this process. I wasn't suggesting that you come up with the construction budget, but, and I don't ever imagine that it would be a scenario where the CPC would fund the entire construction cost of 4 houses, but you can guess what it wouldn't be if it, you know, if you know how big these houses are going to be approximately, and you could put a square foot price to it, even if it's like just $100 per square foot. We could get that in there and make sure that you have that.
It'll definitely be in there before, you know, as your process advances, well before town meeting.
Yeah. Oh, and one other question for you, Lee. I know this is a really long process to get these things built, but with the accelerated funding, does the timeline shorten for you? And how much?
Yeah.
Can you guess?
Yeah. I mean, you know, just as an example, like I said, we already started improvements to the 1 vacant unit. We've got it surveyed. We've done tree work. So we're still, you know, we're working closer to a final site plan, and once we've got that, you know, I think things will really start to pick up. So I'd say, you know, hopefully by January we're off and running like full steam ahead. And you know, previously, just based on lack of funding and Junction Village, et cetera, we had that pushed out, you know, quite longer away. So we're happy to get going on it.
Yeah, I wonder, Eve, if there might be different language than to be determined. I wonder if the language might be something like as bids arrive. mean, something that gives a sense that this is an ongoing process. Would that make some sense, Lee?
Could I just make a clarification? We're not asking for money for construction.
Construction.
This is the whole budget. So, I think the way it would work, please correct me if I'm wrong, is, you'd have the 500,000 or whatever the other number set aside for this project. And then as we had specific needs and requests, we would come to you with a lot of detail about exactly what it was for. And then presumably the money wouldn't be released until your committee approved that requisition. But if that's not the way it works, someone please correct me.
Well, my understanding is that you're not asking for the money under site work or under construction or project buy down. I mean, that's not.
It could be buy down.
Okay, I understand that, but that's not the 395, unless my mathematics is falling completely apart. The 395 is covered by the required, the layout, the obtained current construction, the right?
Yep. This is just the pre-development project budget as a whole as it stands today.
Right. Burton.
Thanks, Diane. So Lee, help me understand the timing here, because I'm wondering about 395 versus 500,000. And I would assume that you're going to be coming back to the CPC for additional funding in a future funding cycle, in our next funding cycle for the construction portion. But you can put sort of a firm guesstimate on $395,000 worth of the cost. And I'm wondering, does it make sense to be asking for 395 now, or what's the additional 115 or excuse me 105 doing? Are you anticipating that would be something that you could come back and tap into once the construction piece got started?
So just to be clear, CHDC is not going to be doing the construction. We're going to bid this out to professional developers, and they will be responsible for the cost of construction. But where we see the biggest delta in the overall project budget, which is not reflected on the sheet, is the cost that we're going to have to contribute or pay basically the developers to be willing to construct the houses and make some level of profit, and then be able to sell them, the developer selling them to eligible people, for affordable housing purposes. So let's just pretend, I'm making this number up. That number could be $200,000 to $300,000 per unit. So, when I started off saying, this 500,000 is, we're going to need well more than that, for the entire project to be completed. We haven't allocated the additional request to a specific use. And if you'd like I'd be more than willing to entertain a conversation either in a meeting or offline with the chair or whomever about, if you want to limit it to certain activities or goods and services or whatever, we'd certainly entertain that if you want to really get into that level of specificity. But
well, again, I'm just trying to figure out with the timing. So that 105,000 that's not specifically estimated here. Would you anticipate needing to access that funding before the next CPC funding cycles were awarded? So here we are, we're talking about this money you would be able to tap into next July on this application. I'm just wondering mentally, are we funding now all the pre-construction activities and getting you there, and then you're coming back in July and asking for $400,000? And when that additional 105 that gets you to 500 now needs to be available to you?
It's probably going to be both. I can certainly, in a kind of a best case scenario, I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could be looking to close with the developer in 2023. That would be like everything goes really well, but it's possible. Certainly FY23, I think it's realistic if you're thinking of allocating it over a number of years. If we could revise. I don't want to put a construction number in for the reasons I stated, but we can certainly make up the delta by replacing that with the TBD. Because like I said, it's going to be well more than that.
When it comes to needing the construction of the buy down funds, right?
Mhm.
Is that in FY 24 anyway, right? So if we can fund fully and account for it easily, the pre-construction stuff in this cycle, but you're going to need to come back and because let's say it takes you 400,000 or 500,000 to get over the finish line with a developer or more.
Mhm.
It sounds like with this proposal, you would have $105,000 sort of banked. And then you would be coming back to us for, let's say you needed 400,000 total. So you're coming back to us for another 295. My question is, why don't you come back for the full 400 later? Or is there some reason, like, for example, in engaging with a developer, doing earnest money or whatever it may be, that you needed in FY 2023 effectively, construction funding? I know that this is about pre-construction, but it's effectively the construction funding.
Sure. So what it does effectively, if we've got more than, I mean, we're going to need it all at some point anyway, but if we've got more than we can, specifically identify today, which is not to say that we can't identify it better before town meeting, then if town meeting approves it, it's available. And again, assuming my kind of requisition process is accurate, you're making a decision at that time whether to actually release those funds. So rather than having to wait for another cycle in town meeting, if they're available, then we'd like to try to tap them if we need them.
And might I ask a question with that, Burton, for just a minute?
Please.
It doesn't seem to me $105,000 even comes close to meeting the needs for buy down and other things, as you and others have, and Liz have taught me. Hi, Liz, welcome. As you and others have taught me. Therefore, would you turn theoretically to the Concord Housing Development Fund, trust fund, for additional funding to help make that possible? So I mean, you have a variety of ways of trying to fund that to get that started. And then you might come back to us for other reasons. But I mean, I think that, that at least in my fantasy, that's what you've been that's what might happen. Is that somewhat accurately?
Sure. Yeah, we certainly anticipate going to the trust for funding requests as the project evolves.
And Eve, does this help with your concern at all, this part of the discussion?
I'm not sure how much we need to do this or not. I understand this is pre-construction budget, but I would just like to see that 105 put in there somewhere so that later, if somebody comes back and says, wait, why did you need 500? I don't see, this math doesn't add up. And I understand you're saying that you need it and you can't really put it in one of these buckets just yet, but I bet you could. Yeah, put it somewhere, or as much, that would do it.
Eve, that's brilliant. And thank you. No, I'm serious. I mean, that's a great discussion. Thank you. Burton? More questions?
I think that's a good idea. I'd say 2 thumbs up for that, because people will know then if you're putting it for a buy down, right, that it's essentially a deposit on that buy down, right? As opposed to, I mean, I think when people see the letters TBD next to construction costs, everybody's going to say middle school, right? So
that's exactly the point.
Yeah. So I think that what you need to do is just make it clear that it's a buy down. That's a secondary process, but you're essentially putting down a deposit on that. My thought is we could be holding that, we set aside as housing funds, for a future year in the CPC. But given the unique circumstances of everything that's going on with affordable housing, I could certainly support putting in that additional funding now, especially if it's available to us in this funding cycle. Yep.
Thank you.
So thanks. I'll put my hand down. Thanks.
Nancy, I'm sorry, I've skipped you and I've.
That's okay. I think the things that I was thinking about have been covered better by Eve and Burton. And I was concerned about schedule and answering the question about the $105,000 being so vague. And I think it makes a lot of sense that it goes to the category of project buy down, for the reasons that have already been brought up. So that's all.
Thank you, Nancy. So you would accept that emendation, Lee and Liz, to kind of adjust your application. So we would get rid of the construction line to a entirely.
That probably makes sense for this purpose.
And then we put that in the project buy down line, 105,000.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Nancy, does that add?
Oh, yeah, I think that answers questions I was gonna raise, although not as coherently.
No, thank you so much. As usual, this committee is so impressive. Okay. So we go forward with this, Lee and Liz, very much. We obviously have to look at our whole budget and see how things are, and we will be doing that in a very short period of time, actually.
Thank you very much.
Do either of you have questions that you would like to ask us, or are we all set?
What's the next step in the process?
Well, we now have to look at all of our applications and figure out how much money we have for each one of these various projects.
Can I go back to schedule, like we had for the first one? Is it possible now to do a revised schedule?
For the project?
For these, yeah, for the project. Since it's for acceleration, it might be good.
CHDC is meeting tomorrow morning. I will bring that up and see if we can update that.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Liz. Very
Sure.
much. Okay.
Liz, what's the best way for them to receive HPP comments?
Send them to me directly. So that's my you might not know my email address. Do you have a chat here? No, but it's liz@rhsohousing.org. And it's also on the website with the HPP. So I'm taking all the public comments. Public comment period goes till Monday.
Liz, in your absence, we discussed the fact that the CPC is mentioned on item 15 or 16 as in a rather proactive way, as if we would get a bond for housing, and that this has been discussed in a rather elaborate discussion. You can see it because it's recorded. We won't repeat it, but to say that we feel that language is not exactly word perfect, and so we're going to send a suggested amendment to that language. Okay.
Perfect.
And we will scoot it your way.
Yeah. Many people have done just that and found that they had other ways that they would prefer to see some of the language, or to strike certain pieces and all of that. So it's putting the document out there was a collaboration of any number of folks, including the consultants, and so that's why we've had public meetings, and hopefully everyone has time to offer those, and gladly will take your input or have any discussion around them. Sometimes it's just softening the things just to evaluate or look into or make available versus really commit to doing something also, so
exactly.
I don't know which particular thing you're talking about per se, but
it's about the bond and the lending part of it.
Yeah. It's always a tricky thing with the borrowing on your CPA. So if it's not something that you want to pursue, that's fine too. I don't
think we decided that, hon, but we did decide that the language was a little bit, as I think Paul's language was a little bit forthright. And we would like to back up on that just a little bit, and we'll send you some revised language.
The bonding scenarios that I've worked with other CPCs on generally take place around a particular project.
That's what
so it's hard to just say we're going to bond without having something in front of what are the numbers? Do we need to? What is it that we're actually talking about? And do you have enough money? And how would it actually work with other kind of commitments? It's hard to commit to something like that in a vacuum. So
just for curiosity, for those of us who are following all this with such care, ARPA funds, is it possible for them to be used for affordable housing?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay.
And I think that the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust has ARPA funds in their account. So and I think that they fully intend to use them. And I think there's two different ways that you can take ARPA funds. But one is is it deferred revenue? Something. What is that term? It's
right. Are you with us?
Lost revenue.
Lost revenue, yeah, not deferred, yeah. And so that really offers more flexibility on the use of the funds, and other is a more traditional allocation towards affordable housing with stated purposes directly from ARPA. So
Good.
those are some, I don't know, technical details, but yes, for sure.
Oh, they're important details. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's a DHCD is certainly using, almost $10 million of ARPA funds to fund all, like, as you recall, like the Junction Village, they were going for $8 million of ARPA funds from the state. So
I'm aware of that. Thank you Liz, so much. And I didn't mean to deflect our work of the committee. Okay, projected FY24 funding.
Thank you.
And thank you both so much, Lee and Liz, for attending. We really appreciate it. And you can stay on if you wish. We'd always love to have you. Okay, Anne is going to put up our a discussion of projected FY24 funding. I think. And are you going to put up that? Here she comes. Hooray. And our challenge is to first review these, just say them aloud, as it were, and then to have a discussion about each one and do perhaps a slightly preliminary, not too preliminary discussion. We have December 6th as the kind of final delimiter or determinator if we have questions or if we have confusion about any of these. So the first one is the Town of Concord Planning Regional Housing Office for, my eyesight is not keen in this one, 33,000. Is there any way to make this a little bit bigger, Anne? I'd be so grateful.
Anne?
Yes.
Pardon the interruption. I'm just, as we look through these line by line, could we just start by knowing what the total request is versus the total funding allocation is, so we can sort of start weighting these things in our mind?
Absolutely. I apologize. That's what I was going
and I know that these numbers include the 500,000 Assabet bus request. That's reflected here.
Right. That may be too big because we don't get the right-hand side of this. And so let's see what we can do. There we go. Practically perfect in every way. Okay, so let's go. What we have in terms of total assets, our money to spend is, and I have printed this out in advance, so I have the advantage of having my own sheet right here, is 1 million.
It's on the bottom there.
$1,847 and $8,847 and 153.
Okay. So that's our total 1,187,153. Just gonna make a note of that. And what's the sum total of all the requests we have now, including that new Assabet amount?
I don't know that. Can you tell us that, Ann?
If you did a sum of that, is it 1,844,230? Well, I think we have a holiday party and we're done.
Right.
I think that'll cater the party, the delta there.
It's
right?
pretty amazing, isn't it?
I don't think that includes the new Assabet.
I think it does, actually. Well, I'm not sure. I know that the new Assabet number was up there.
Now, the only question is whether we have to put aside some money.
Oh, it is, okay.
For anything. And so we need to look at this to make sure there's not the need to put aside some money because we've not sufficiently funded something. So let's make sure we also take that into consideration. So you want to start up and for us? Well, let's run through them first and then let's look at each one individually. Is that all right? Does that make sense to everybody? Is that a logical way to proceed?
Can I ask one question? So
sorry, Nancy. No, I'm teasing.
The Assabet River Bluff housing is in there now for 500,000.
It is.
Is that still the correct number of the total requests at 1,444,230, or did that go up? I have something that shows the Assabet River housing request at 100,000 with that same total.
So
yeah, that total's not correct, I don't think.
Here.
So it might be $400,000 more in total requests.
It is.
And then, yeah.
I just presumed the math was correct, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't in the midst of trying.
Well, if you ever have a math question, just ask me. No.
Okay.
So I think that total is correct because the one, the paper I'm
1844.
holding
Yeah.
that's old
exactly.
has 1444 instead of
Oh, there you go.
1844.
Yeah, and what I had was still the old one, so I didn't print this one. I assumed that was the same. Okay, good.
I wonder if before we go through them one by one, and have you already calculated or determined whether there's any sections that are underfunded?
That's what I was just saying, Sarah, is that we have to make sure that we
It would
don't
be
have.
good to know that before we go into each
Right,
line, I
but
think.
I wasn't going to do each one
Oh,
right
okay.
now. Just run through the whole list so we could remind ourselves.
Oh,
And
okay.
then see where there might be a deficit and need a
But-
reserve fund. And then go
Diane, I
forward there.
I have
Paul,
a- I have a question before then.
okay,
Is the Warner's Pond in or out of this? Because right now it's in it, but I'm not sure
we
it
may
is. in
we
it.
may not choose to fund it, Paul. That's a decision we have to make.
Well, no, I'm not sure we have an application that's the old application funding. I'm not sure the status of that application, that we can't even consider that. So I don't know, maybe that should be discussed first because that's a big number.
Okay, I had thought we would take it as we came to it.
Okay, no, it's fine.
If you don't mind, I mean, it's a big question, and I think the application is fine. I mean, the application stands and it's.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything, but the question is whether we believe that this is something we should be funding in advance of the many questions we might have as a committee. Do you think that's wrong reasoning, Paul? Help me with that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think from the start, Delia submitted the application, but since her presentation, she's pulled back and now there are several options with different costs on it. That 550 is a plug number that was the original application. Yeah, that is the one in front of us, but it seems that application is obsolete.
I don't think she
No,
backed away from the application. I think she strongly reiterated her desire that it be funded, but Sarah would know more.
Well, I only know more because last night I listened to your last meeting when you spent hours talking about this, and I thought it was very clear that Delia was still requesting this amount, even though it's not determined exactly, which direction the town will go.
Right.
It was clear she was requesting that, but also we had put out the idea of putting that in reserve, an open space reserve, rather than funding this application. She didn't want to lose the money. That was her point.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I guess there's a subtle difference there.
Yeah, but that's different. That's what we would do.
Yeah.
That's the committee's job.
That's our decision as we get to that project, and we have, we go through them one by one and we make those decisions.
Okay.
So, and I think that the deliberations, as Sarah points out last time, were pretty, and thank you, Sarah, for watching that. That's a labor of love and is much appreciated. Okay, so if it's not okay, I just want to go through to remind us all of what the applications are. They're not that so many that we can't do that briefly, and then we'll go back kind of one by one. Is that okay now, or is there a problem with that? If there is, just speak up.
It's fine.
Okay, thumbs up or some nod or something for me. Okay, here we go. Okay, the Town of Concord Planning Regional Housing Services for $33,000. The Concord Housing Development Corporation we've just done $500,000. The Town of Concord Planning on the Bruce Freeman Ray Ontario $50,000. And that's one we could discuss in some detail if we chose to. The Town of Concord Natural Resources Open Space and Recreation Plan update. And that's $100,000. Again, we could discuss any of these if we wish to. The Town of Concord Natural Resources Warner's Pond Restoration, the one that Paul was just referencing, $550,000. The Town of Concord Public Works Cemetery Restoration, $340,000. The Town of Concord Public Works Civil War Monument, $165,000. And we've had much more documentation in detail since that was originally presented. The Town of Concord Planning Historic Preservation Plan for $50,000. And the Town of Concord Archives Preservation of Historic Plans, $16,230, and staff and technical support, $40,000. So if we go back and look, Anne, if you could just scroll up for just a minute, in terms of open space, we have a robust even without the $550,000 or some portion of it, we haven't quite committed 20%, 10% to that, but let's see, let's keep going down for just a minute.
Yeah, we don't have the split.
In terms of historic preservation, we have an amplitude, I think, of appropriated funds. In terms of recreation, that's conflated here with the open space. And so we have some money for recreation, but not a robust amount, I would suggest.
And just to note on that, Diane, if that 550 wasn't in there, we would be under the 10%.
That's exactly right. So can we keep going down for just a minute? So that means if we don't fully fund the Warner's Pond thing, then we can put some money aside for that. Okay, so historic prevention, affordable housing, and recreation and open space. Terrific. All right.
Diane, just a comment on classification. If you go back to open space and recreation, the only one which is pure recreation is really Bruce Freeman Rail Trail as defined by CPA. The rest are loosely shared, but it doesn't. I don't think much matters. I just want to point that out. That
I think so.
That it's really 50,000 recreation. The rest are open space and passive recreation, which is in the open space category.
What about the recreation plan update?
That's open space. That we funded recreation department plan last year.
Right.
This is Delia's open space plan. Open space and recreation is, if you look at it, the recreation part of it is passive recreation and trails. So that's what that plan is. So hey, look, we can call it part recreation, but I just want to point.
I think the CPA category for recreation includes something that's more passive than you're thinking.
It does indeed. I've reread it
So,
several times.
I think that's very clear.
Yeah.
So it's not just constructed recreational facilities per se, like it doesn't have.
No, it's fields and it's fields and it's rail trail. That's fine.
It's not just rail trails, though. It's trails.
It's trails.
Specifically trails. People walk on all kinds of trails other than the rail trail. So I think maybe that's not a correct distinction.
Well, I know it's something that with which Paul has been struggling and wanting to
I know.
attention to it. And I think we teased him last week, and I said, listen, if I'm walking a trail, I consider that recreation.
I heard you say that.
It absolutely is recreation. I'm just referring back to the definitions in the plan. And we can table that right now, but we should take a look at it again. And I'm likely wrong.
No, it's not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of just bringing our attention, I think, to something that's important, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the first one and make some deliberations. Let's some potential deliberations. The Concord Housing Regional Housing Services, 33,000. Do I hear any recommendation for that one?
I so recommend.
I support.
Okay, so let's anybody else object to that? So let's theoretically put 33,000. The Assabet River Bluff Housing, community housing.
In absence of another voice, I think it's critical that we fund this to the maximum extent that we can justify by the application. And I think it's very clear that 395 is justified by the application, but I think maybe a little discussion on parking the additional 105 either with the Development Corp or setting it aside for the 2024 funding cycle would be merited.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I agree.
Okay. So let's put 500,000 in, and if you could put in parentheses and 395,000 so that we recall the possibility of taking some of that away if we feel that we want to encourage them to wait for another year to ask for that funding. I think for the buy down to get a developer, they may want to be able to do that as soon as possible, but that's just what I've slowly been surely begun to learn about these things. Okay, the town
I
of,
thought, oh, I'm sorry, I thought we had general agreement, he would put it in the buy down. Maybe,
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Juan.
But does that go someplace in particular that Burton mentioned?
It goes to the buy down, so that would get us to 500,000.
No, but I
Yeah,
mean,
it-
who holds it?
I think that would mean it would be, well, we would hold it until the CPC came to us, but they would be authorized to request it because we would have funded it.
yeah, it's in his budget.
Yeah.
It's got a slot in his budget.
Terrific.
And John, I'm fine with that approach. To be clear, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to skip over that since this is new.
No, I thought your big goal, Burton, was to get rid of the TBAs
Right.
or TBAs.
And I
More
think
or less.
Eve spoke to that eloquently, so thank you very much. The town of Concord planning, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, $50,000. Who was in charge of that one? I mean, who followed that one with particular care?
I think I was one of the people that was shepherding it or watching it. We've been generous with Marcia on this rail trail in the past. We've been stingy with her in the past. I thought she was on the money here because of some of the special needs there in this at the old train station, the center of West Concord. So it all made sense to me, the things she wanted to do with it.
Okay, we should know, John, thank you so much. We should note that Junction Park continues to be a discussion in town because the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people are saying, wait, don't put up these big barriers in terms of planters and other things. And we're pro bikers, and the other people at the Junction Park and the West Concord village people are saying, yes, we need it. So that this is being discussed in many different committees. I mean, I've heard it now in at least 3 different committees. This issue has come up. So Burton and then Charles.
Yeah, just on this, I put in a plug of support for this. I compared this to the example of what's just transpired in Bedford, where they went through many, many years of planning and they just essentially shut down about a $10 million project to bring a accessible paved trail to Bedford. I think it's so important that in Concord, Marcia's worked with so many stakeholders, and I think I hear universal praise for this trail. And part of that has been Marcia's willingness to do things like go back and provide some additional landscaping, go back and provide some fencing for a neighbor that feels that they're impacted, and work with all the stakeholders. And this latest thing is working, with the Green Thumbs and others that are concerned about the pedestrian bicycle conflict. And while we've seen many small little dribs and drabs requests here, I think Marcia's willingness to take this to the very end that's what this is a reflection of, and make this project a real success for Concord and maybe an example for other communities to follow in the future. So I think that this is money well spent.
Thank you, Charles.
Well, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I think that Marcia made a very good case for the planters and how they would operate with the bicycle traffic. So that was. I know people are criticizing, but I stand with that plan.
Thank you so much. And Paul?
No, I'm quite supportive of it. I just have one question. There's a part of this project which is the prison cemetery. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if that's really historic preservation as opposed to recreation. It doesn't much matter as far as funding the project. I think it's worthwhile, but I think that's a really good historic intersection of the rail trail and historic preservation.
Or open space.
Yeah, that's a really appropriate question. It's maybe all 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a combination of historic preservation, open space, and recreation. And so maybe, Anne, is there a way to kind of add that as a codicil to all this? Because I think there is a kind of historic preservation here. A recognition that a lot of people have died in that prison and been buried, not necessarily with headstones or any recognition of who they were. And this is in part a kind of commentary on that. So thank you, Paul, for that sensitive and appropriate comment. Okay, so what do we say, 50,000 here without reservation?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Do I hear any, okay, I mean, these aren't final decisions, we still got to make sure we're okay financially.
Yeah, we'll figure out the split later.
Right. Town of Concord Natural Resources, Ann, could you bring it down just a little bit so we can see this? Thank you, hon. Town of Concord Natural Resources, Open Space and Recreation Plan Update. $100,000. Now, who shepherded this one? Paul?
No, I didn't. I'll defer to whoever shepherded first.
Okay,
If not, I have a comment.
okay, please do.
No, it's a financial nit. Delia's clarification had that amount at 95,450. If we want to change it. Her submission, the supplemental information, the budget was 95.
1,000, and that's a good thing to do. So if we could do that, that would give us a little bit more money, and that's terrific. So thank you, Ann.
Other than that, I'm supportive of that.
Do we hear anything else from people? And what, you know, what we've learned is that these consultants tend to charge about that much. You know, by the time you get the plans down and the consultants, there we are. Never mind, I shouldn't say anything about what I think about consultants. Okay, Town of Concord on natural resources and Warner's Pond restoration. Let's take a deep breath before we get into this one. Okay. Let's hear some pros and some cons. I mean, let's hear some of our collective thinking about this, our reservations, and then we can try to discern, you know, what we finally feel. And in fact, Anne, if you wouldn't mind, let's go back to so we can see everybody's faces, because we all know what this is about. And let's hear from each other for a minute, and hear our collective pros and cons. So let's start with the pros. What is good about? Well, let me hear. We've got some hands up, so let's start there. Paul and then Sarah.
So let me start with the pros. This project can be very valuable if it's optimized. That's my pro on it. My con is, there are two cons. I really don't think that the committee has an application in front of us to fund. We have a request that money be reserved for that project, but Delia has explicitly said that she's rethinking, that we haven't decided which way to go. And the costs are, you know, 2 million to 3 million, and maybe they're even more for dredging, which is 6 million. So my fiscal responsibility on this committee says that we can't fund an application because we don't have it, but we can reserve funds in open space for that purpose when Delia's clarification process, which is well underway, comes into focus. So, you know, I would say, I don't know how we do this, that we can't approve that project, but we can set aside funds possibly for that project.
Okay, so you would, I think maybe the implication is you would ask us to wait a year on that one, put the funds aside, let them figure out what they're doing, and then fund if appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the pro is it's a potentially valuable project from multiple respects. It has some problems. It has some implementation problems, and it has some fiscal problems, and it has some coordination problems. I know that Delia is talking to Anna about, you know, thinking about the intersection of Giroux and that. So there's a lot of thinking going on in the town, and it's premature to say we're funding this project, I think, for a variety of reasons, but it's valuable. And I think we should set aside, to the extent we can, money for that project, so she doesn't have to wait another year if we can actually pull the trigger on something.
That's interesting. I don't know whether we can do that. I think once you set aside funds, you have to wait a year. But Anne, is that true or not?
Yes, I agree with you that it would need to be voted on at town meeting. And so if it isn't voted on now, then it would need to wait a year.
Yeah, that's what we can put the money aside. There's nothing wrong with doing that, Paul. but then it would be a year's hiatus. And that may be fine. I mean, it's waited quite a long time already. We've been banking money on that for quite a long time, I think. Yes, Sarah.
So it was clear to me from the discussion that you had at the last meeting that the town has, for a number of years now, I believe, voted to do work to this pond. And so there was generally support. However, now, of course, there's the option of, well, do we do absolutely nothing? Do we take out the dam? What do we do? So what needs to be done is up for discussion. Now, the only option there that wouldn't cost money is doing absolutely nothing. But I can't believe, we can kind of, it clearly needs discussion, and not doing nothing has a lot of consequences as well. So something needs to be done. So given that the town has already voted a number of times that we would need to do something, as long as we can somehow caveat, as we put it forward to town meeting, if we do, that, this is pending, town discussions and support and voting or whatever, I would be comfortable assigning the money this year, given that we know we need to do something.
Thank you very much. So that's a pro comment.
Yeah.
John.
Well, I think Sarah pretty well said everything that I've been thinking about. The history of banking the money. The fact I don't myself think that removing the dam will get the public support when she does the public hearing, and the public hearing is a good plan, and we have the money. I could see cutting it if we needed to, but it doesn't look like we need to. So I thought Sarah said it well.
Thank you, John, very much. Nancy.
I would like to say that I think that what's been put forth are options that are likely, and mostly options that will extend what the town has already supported in the past. And certainly, if one option is selected over another, you would only be reimbursing or supporting the work for the option that's eventually chosen. So I think it would be a shame not to go forward and try to get something done here that's been in the works for so long.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Andrew.
I was one of the people who was assigned to take like a deep dive into this, so I did look at all.
So to speak, right?
What?
So to speak.
Oh
but
yeah, well, 12-inch dive.
Unless you can't do a deep dive there, so never mind.
And though there was, I guess I could only really look at what was really proposed in the first place, because the other options weren't all that fleshed out. But there were some reasons to go with what was presented, and then what we got was a couple of alternatives. And this is this placeholder, and the biggest problem I had with that is there's already $2.5 million tied up in this.
Right.
We're being asked to tie up more money in this for basically. My concern is we're continuing to tie up more and more money for a project that we don't quite know the scale of. Yeah. And to say it's for to tie it up for another year won't affect the pond's ecology at all. Likely there's going to be needed permit amendments, which will take months and months anyway. This doesn't seem like something that needs to be automatically throwing all this money here right now because Delia would like to keep it. And I think that was the big message I got from the last meeting, was that Delia wants this money, so we should give it to her. And I, as somebody who looked through all the documents, didn't find that much support for the idea that something catastrophic is going to happen next year, that there wasn't a lot of support within the documentation that all of this would last 100 years as presented. because that was a big selling point, was we only have to do this once in the next 100 years.
Right.
Based on the document, their number, they actually came up with 500 years, but I think they felt silly writing that down, so they brought it back down to 100. And if it filled, so there was a lot of questions about where the info was coming from, how this was all going to play out long term, and for us to throw a bunch of money at something we now don't know the scale of makes me nervous. Especially where if we have a big funding year this year and we don't next year, well, what if there's a good project that comes up? There's a open space preservation. If we just allocate the money and say, look, we've got a bank for open space. You're going to need a lot more money later, so you've now got $500,000 within the open space. You can help allocate that. And then it lets the town make the decision when we actually know what we're being asked for, and that would be my take on the matter.
That's an eloquent disquisition, Andrew, on its vulnerabilities as a project. And so let's keep, Nancy, do you have your hand up? Or
Oh, no,
okay. Charles.
I never heard 500 years though.
It was like 60 pages into one of the reports, because they were measuring the amount of
That's
flowing
all right.
in, and they were counting the mud flowing out, and they were saying this is how much it will fill in over time, and the number was 500 years, but they cut it to 100.
Yeah, for some reason, probably.
Well, I mean, this whole thing, and I keep thinking of it as the funding of an idea, as opposed to the funding of an established project, because that's how, my mind works. It seems to me, kind of a very interesting abstraction, but let's keep going. Charles.
I don't see anything in the CPA resources page that indicates that there is $1.5 million or something like that allocated to this previously. It just isn't there. And it looks as though something called unappropriated fund balance seems to be declining. Projected for fiscal 23 and projected fiscal 24, they're down to it would be down to $230,000. So I don't see it must be reflected somewhere else other than on this sheet of paper.
Oh, Charles, that's very interesting. I don't have that piece of paper you're looking at, but it seems to me that we have allocated $500,000 3 times to Delia for the potential, the plan that she would then dredge the pond. Do you remember that? And so that, I believe that's the $150,000 that people are, $1.5 million that people are referring to.
I'm sure you're right, but
I would guess.
But for some reason, it just doesn't show up.
Slide 8
Showing
of
up in
Delia's
the balance sheet that I have in front of me.
Okay, Anne, can you work on that while we can? But Charles, absent that for a minute, absent the clarity of how much money we've given in the past and how much we have, what is your sensibility about this particular project?
I would, given if in fact there is $1.5 million there already, and the difficulty of getting any reasonable bid for doing the job, I don't know. I'm kind of leaning negative toward it.
Thank you very much. Negative to ambivalent. Thank you. Eve.
Just a quick question. We have to have 10% in this bucket, right? And we'd be under if we took this out.
What we'd have to do is to put some money specifically aside. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And also, if we recommend an amount less, we could potentially award her some less, right?
We could.
Because my only thought is I do appreciate what Sarah said, that for the potential mess that she's about to deal with the public hearings and the new information that she's got. And I just noticed how deflated Delia was after getting those bids on the dredging. And wouldn't it be great to put some wind in her sail on finishing this thing, that's following through all the way? And then my last question is, if we've already funded, as you said, 500,000 each year for 3 years. Wasn't there an application submitted for that and that money designated toward purposes that presumably she was working on? It wasn't just to bankroll something in the future for those other applications, right?
It had to do with dredging. I mean, the plan was, and my recollection could be wrong, but my recollection is that she had this plan that she would accumulate enough money to get people in to dredge the pond, which would, originally in a rather broad, bigger space than what we're seeing right now. She was going to dredge two different major sections of the pond, making it useful, making it swimmable, making boats be able to use on it, all sorts of things. And now she goes out and she looks at bids, and it's $6 million to do it. And so she is astonished by that bid, and it causes a retreat and a reconsideration about the best way to deal with the pond. I believe that's an accurate replication of the districts. If anybody
There's also the boat launch. The
Yes.
boat launch facility and improvements.
Right.
Which, in order to have a boat launch, it makes sense to have something to launch it into.
Yes, in order to be able to use boats, you thought they needed a launch. So Eve, that the funding was really quite specific and quite optimistic at the time. I mean, and none of us thought of it particularly as optimistic. We thought of it as sensible. But now, we have there's a different perspective. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wonder if in our last meeting, I didn't exactly hear her say that she didn't want $550,000, but I also didn't hear her say that she exactly needed $550,000 for her next. So it occurs to me that some portion of that might be appropriate, given the reservations that some people have. I don't know.
And can you be specific about where you would put that money, or what portion of what she's doing you would fund? Would we fund, for instance, the consultants?
Exactly.
Looking
Yeah,
at
and we have 100,000 for her open space consultant. Perhaps there's a consultant here that also costs 100,000 to do all of this work that's upcoming for her, or to something to that degree. If I remember correctly, the first time that she presented this, when she just got that bad news about the multi-million-dollar bid, our comments to her were going to be, where is your breakdown of your budget for this 550? And I don't know that she ever really had a chance to circle back about that because all of this. So anyway, that was my only comment. I would like to do something personally. I would like to do something for Delia, but I'm not sure if 550 is appropriate, but I don't really know.
Well, she has approached, as my understanding is, and I presume you can support me on this or correct me on this. She has approached now consultants to give her some advice on how to move forward and what the options are. So, perhaps, and of course she has some money banked that she could use for that, and she's already used some of our money that we've given her for some kind of superficial dredging and some exploration of the condition of the pond. So she has used some of that money already. So Paul, thank you, Eve, that's wonderful. Paul.
Yeah, so I have a comment and a suggestion, and followed by a rumor. I'll say the rumor. So my discomfort is not the potential value of the project. My discomfort is the ambiguity of the application, and that we really don't have a project to fund. Delia came back with some supplemental information, which had several options. If she actually revised the application to say, look, she's applying for restoration of the pond, and there's several different options that she's considering, all of which will require funds, then I'd be inclined to fund something on this project. At least then we can point to an application, formal application that we have funded. The formal application right now, in my mind, is obsolete. So that's the suggestion, that she revise the application to reflect her latest supplemental information, and maybe we can fund it. It doesn't have to be 500,000. Now, the rumor, I just came from a meeting with Mary Hardman. It was the Recreation Commission meeting. We were discussing CPC, and she said that she believes that next year the middle school is going to come to this committee for the outdoor fields part of the
They
So-
definitely are, Paul. I've heard from Laurie Hunter, the superintendent of schools. I was at a meeting where this question was brought up publicly.
Yeah, so that, if we defer this to
They're
next
gonna
year,
be, we're definitely going to be hit over a series of phased requests in the coming years.
right, so anticipating that's gonna suck up a lot of money for valuable purpose, so deferring this whole thing a year and just not doing anything, we just may lose it. So I think the two options that we have here is we ask Delia to revise the application, we fund it to some degree, or we put it in open space reserve. We don't just walk away from this.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, very much. Sarah.
So just to remind everybody that it's not just open space, right? It's open space and recreation.
Yes.
And we'd have to determine what percentage of each, I guess.
Well,
Right.
it's a little hard to define it as recreation at the
Right.
moment because
Because we don't know. Yeah, but just a question, Paul's suggestion I think is a good one about, making it clearer in the application. We do allow changes to the app. We don't.
Oh, yes, we do.
Oh, we do. Yeah.
There are it's varied over the years, but under most recent approaches, it has been to guide people to make their application as appropriate as possible.
Yeah.
And I would be under the present circumstances a little reluctant to take this before the town, only because it's hard to know. Well, they might do this and they might do that, but we're putting some money in case they do this.
Well, that's why I think I like Paul's suggestion of asking Delia to add a whole statement about the potential options and the fact that we're going to have these town committees, because we've had a lot of great discussion and the YouTube videos are out there, but I think people are more likely to find the document and then just be able to see what's going on. So I do think that's a good suggestion.
Sarah, thank you very much. I think a consensus on that is emerging. Charles.
I apologize for my previous comment because I just realized that actually the previous appropriations are actually being held. $1.5 million is being held by Natural Resources Commission in anticipation of their current use. So I was just out of line when I made that comment.
You weren't out of line. You were trying to figure something out. No one's.
Okay. Yeah, that's all it was.
No, spot on, Charles. John, and then Ann Clifford. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I think it's accurate that we have funded 1.5 in the past.
That's right.
The town has put up, I think, $1 million. Did Delia tell us? And then she did provide a estimated cost.
Yes, she did. The last
in the past, it comes up to 3.8. And it's for the limited dredging of 5,000 cubic yards from the east portion and around Scout Island,
right.
And then not transporting the material anyplace, but just putting it in the pond.
Right.
So I'm not sure she's without a legitimate application that's well enough documented.
That is my sense as well. She presented last week this to us. And Anne has put it up so thoughtfully. Thank you, Anne. And if you hold it there with the money, you can see that she's talked about the data collection and analysis, the project management portion, the modeling, the engineering design, the permitting, which is astonishingly expensive. But I gather that completely what one does, the final design and bid support, construction, and that's where the money jumps. And then the monitoring of it. I mean, I feel like we have a pretty specific.
But this is only one page. Go to the next page.
Well, that's the alternative of tearing down the dam.
Right.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, but we don't know which one was proceeding. They both require money.
And she has almost enough money for that second one.
Yeah, she has
Right,
money.
but she's only, if you add our money to what I think she has already,
That's right.
2.5, we're at 3 and she's looking for 3.8. She's not that far off.
But you don't know if she's looking for 3.8. 3.8's the number
Well, it's right here.
Well, but she doesn't specify what the plan is, though. She says a plan could cost 3.8. And
Well,
that's
again,
where my biggest problem
I-
came in.
Okay,
with
well, it's
this.
laid out in 8 tasks. So,
Can you move it down so we can see that, so everybody can see that? Where the 3.8 shows up,
3.8.
3.8 million for the total project.
Yeah.
And she would have with our 500,000 and the already accumulated 1.5, that would be 2 million. And then from the town, additional million, and she would be shy 860. Can you go down to the other project for just a minute? If they do it differently. And to the total, thank you. Then she has an amplitude of money. She'll have an extra 200,000 to spend on something. John, keep going, and then Anne has her hand up.
no, I was simply the point that it left me puzzled what we would be asking her that would be different from this.
Right.
Well, my
This-
suggestion was turn this into the application.
It is an application. I mean, that's the way I see it.
This
No,
is an amendment to the application. This is an addendum to the a codicil, as it were, to the
Well,
application. Is that the wrong language, John? You can't, that's.
Well,
you-
it seems to me the application is what you add in documentation. It all makes one application.
Right.
So but I'm confused about what we would need. I mean, I understand we could vote to cut this money and trim it in some way, but I'm unpersuaded what we'd learn from asking her to do a different approach. This is, I think, what she would like to do. We have to decide, do we want to fund it in full, or do we think we should just cut it in half in some way? But this looks to me like a legitimate application
Yes,
historically.
but we've all agreed, including Delia, that this is no longer what she wants to do for sure, because she needs to get town input.
I mean, it seems to me, that's the reason I keep describing it as an idea. I mean, she has a couple of different ideas, doesn't she, about how to approach this problem. But there is no clear resolution as to what the eventual plan will be. And I'm not Sarah, you have more technical knowledge about these things than I, but my question would be, if we waited a year and she solidified what she wanted to do, would that be ruinous or in any way detrimental to the condition of the pond or to the project going forward?
Well, yeah, the pond's going to get worse and the prices are going to go up. So that's why I just think we need to make funding available for as soon as the town has come to some sort of decision.
Okay, Anne?
Yes, my point was the same as John Crathley's, is that she did provide an additional information, which would, amend her application with those numbers that you would ask for.
Thank you, Anne. Nancy, and then
I would just like to say she's provided, in my experience of looking at applications and projected budgets, she's provided a very great deal of detail. I would also say that it's a wise thing to take this out to the public because it's such a big project potentially. And I think the only project that has well, I won't say that. I think the decision to remove the dam is probably one that would not pass muster in public forum. I think it would be very much opposed by people that you could guess, the people who now have a nice lakeside view and others maybe in the community, but also to turn that water resource into more of a meadow ecological resource. It would be different. It would be wonderful for many other reasons, but there's been so much time and effort for this, and providing, it does have some recreational aspect, but the boat launch is a small part of the dredging. So
So a marsh and a meadow does not seem to be, from your perspective, something the community would be likely to support.
I just think it would be very controversial.
Yeah.
And that's been mentioned before by people who know that neighborhood better than I do.
And so the question is, what do we do about our funding given that?
Well, I think we should go ahead and fund it. I mean, if she doesn't, if the dam removal doesn't work, the other one probably will. And, you know, she'll be reimbursed for what she spends. And perhaps there'll be a resolution to that. It seems like there would be.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Just a little quibble with what Sarah said. I think the pond is not going to get any worse in 1 year. So delaying for a year. However, costs will, on the cost side, they probably will go up. But let me just say, Delia mentioned, even when she put together those numbers, that there was high uncertainty in those numbers. And we were so far off on the whole dredging project that we are based on faith. We're thinking we could actually do any of these projects when in fact, the bids may come in at millions of dollars higher. We may have to kind of just retrench here. But so my point is, these estimates are highly uncertain. If we're willing to fund this in that high uncertainty, then just let's be aware of it.
Okay, so you're suggesting that were we to go forward, there's a certain kind of vulnerability in the funding numbers, and that they're fungible in a way that is concerning.
Yeah, there's no guarantee she or can bring this back into a manageable, fundable project, even the option she has. And I'm very sympathetic and supportive, but the fiscal reality is, we'll be putting $2 million and holding that in abeyance, so we may have to regret doing that and pull that back later. Now, but let's go into that transparently with open eyes.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Yeah, that was my concern is putting the money out there because we feel bad it didn't work out the way it was planned. To me, doesn't feel like the best possible use of the money. Like the idea of holding it in abeyance for open space for next year, to me feels more like, because she's gonna, there's a lot of support for dredging, and there's a lot of support, that the idea of some scaled down dredging project could work. That's still going to need way more money than she has right now anyway. So holding off on actually funding this year until a cohesive plan is together and say, hey, I've rallied the troops behind this, not rallying the troops behind the vague notion that the neighbors like the pond, feels more defensible. And then, you're not standing up there in front of town meeting defending throwing money at something that you don't quite know what it is, and it's derailing other things, and it becomes a smokescreen that you may not need, especially where we're fully funded this year. This could be not much of a discussion. For other projects there, you just have this big black hole question. It's my take on it.
Thank you so much. Let's take a couple more comments and let's see if we can come up with a proposal. Eve?
Just quickly, I was astonished at Paul's comment that we might not have money for this next year because of the middle school project, and that's definitely something to think about. I would really love to see us say at least that we've, it's hit a roadblock or a bump, and we're going to fund her research. Her next step is clearly to bring it to the town and to do more studies, I suppose, or more research for her plan. I realize that she has a budget, and I apologize for saying that she didn't. That was my bad. But can we at least give her some money toward her next year's worth of work, which is to wrangle a project for us that's more presentable?
I've tried to stay out of the discussion, but I would say one thing, Eve, just in response to that. She does have money. She has the $1.5 million, and she could draw on that money to do what you're suggesting. And
she could, but she wrote proposals for those things, and that's the money that's the money she's counting on right now, of using that money for whatever's coming forward for the work. And then the new information that she has is that she has a different work that she has to do, which is to do this consultant thing. And so I would think that I realize that it does sound like we're just saying we feel bad for Delia, but the new piece of information is that she has to study this situation more, and she has to hire somebody to study that information. So if she keeps the money that she has already for her potential project, then couldn't we defend saying we're going to help her study this situation some more? That's my only point.
My
Thank you.
understanding
That's
though
good.
is that she's
That's
actively using
Wait,
that
just a minute,
money.
Andrew. Wait, hold on. Geez,
Okay.
that's beautiful. But let's hear from Sarah first and then Andrew. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, when we were talking about updating the proposal, and forgive me, I need to look at the latest version to remember exactly what's in there. I wasn't commenting on the fact that there wasn't prices in there. It was more the fact that there might be different options to the one that was first put forward. I don't know if anyone has it in front of them and can tell me, are those potential new options mentioned anywhere?
There are only two strategies that she's presented in this.
But oh, she has put it in the updated version. Okay, forgive me then. I'm out of
These two options.
Okay.
And so,
but there are potentially more options, but I guess that'll come out in the debate. But the other thing I wanted to say was, in response to Andrew's comments, was that I thought from the last meeting that Delia was very clear that she would have the forums, or she's working to have the forums prior to town meeting, so that when town meeting actually voted on this, they would have an idea of what the project might be.
I think you're exactly right, Sarah. Let me just remind all of us that there is there are a series of public hearings that precede town meeting. And at those public hearings, the CDC needs to present its proposals. And the wording and how we present something, if it's still not, absolutely determined how it's going to be, will require some delicate approach. And since I may have to do that, I'm going to need the advice of everybody, to get me through that, so that we can do it in a way that is both dignified and accurate. Because we don't usually come to town meeting with, well, it might be this and it might be that, depending in January. It might be this and it might be that, depending on what the town decides before the town meeting. And incidentally, you might have noticed that the special town meeting date has changed. For those of you wanting to pay attention to town meeting, it's gone from the 19th on January to let's see, I've written it down someplace. Linda, are you with us, hon? Can you tell us when the new special town meeting is going to be?
The special town meeting hasn't changed. The election date for the follow-up ballot question has changed.
Ah, okay.
That date is February 16th.
Okay, so that's the ballot date. Thank you.
Okay.
Somebody wrote me and I was misinformed. So this one of the few select board meetings I have missed. So thank you, Linda. Terrific. Andrew.
Just as a point of clarity, I believe Delia mentioned during the call that she was already using that money
Yes.
that had been set aside to do this work.
Yes,
That the numbers that she came up with actually came from the consultant that she's already using. She's drawing down the funds.
Absolutely.
So it's not that not having more money would somehow delay the planning process. She has the money and she's been using it.
Yes, and I think we thank you, Andrew, and I think we've noted that. And if we haven't, if for some reason I haven't made that clear, yes, indeed, she has the money to do that. I mean, that's the advantage. Okay, may I hear a proposal for the funding of this project? And then perhaps a second for that.
Too early.
Well, we're not going to get a new application, I don't think.
I find myself wanting to hear from Delia.
Yeah, I had the same idea that maybe we should kick this over to December, because there's clearly some differences of view about full funding, partial funding, and reserve. And it might be useful to have her speak one more time about how she feels about the choices we have to make.
Okay.
I think she's told us that there's uncertainty, but she doesn't want to lose the money. And I mean, that's
I think
right.
it's more than that.
What more?
I just think she's laid out more information than just that. I don't think that's a fair, maybe it's not a fair.
Yeah.
characterization of what her thinking is.
Yeah, I've heard a few times on this call tonight, it characterized as Delia wants some money because she wants the money. And I think that's I think that's, I'll go further and say grossly unfair. I think that she got hit with a very large proposal right before, while after she had submitted this application. She's hustled, she's provided some more detail, she's going to have hearings on it. It could very well be that she got some contractor that came in with a bid in this crazy atmosphere now and put in a huge bid, and then next year it's a smaller bid, right? I think that she is acting in good faith. I think this has been a project that has had community support for years, as is evidenced by the support from this committee in 2 prior funding rounds. And I think we owe her the respect to consider this application on its face.
Would you like to make a proposal, therefore?
I would propose that we support this application. I think there will be I think there will be additional hearings before the public hearing, before town meeting on this. And if people think that it's if at that juncture, we've had sort of last minute meetings right before town meeting. If at that juncture we don't feel we have clarity, we can reduce the size of our proposal. As it stands, Delia may come back and there would be absolutely vociferous support at her hearings for continuing dredging, and we would be foolhardy to push the cost for that further into the future and continue to leave money in the bank.
Thank you, Burton. Do I hear a second to Burton?
I second.
Okay, that's a second. I'm going to do a roll call on this one, and let's go around. And well, first of all, comments. Are there any other comments that people would like to make? Discussion?
Yeah, I just want to comment. Please don't misconstrue my comments. Delia is acting in good faith, but there's a lot of uncertainty she's dealing with, and it's a really complex problem. And I think what she told us is, she's going to need the funds. So I don't want to say anything more than that. She's acting in good faith. I don't want my comments to be misinterpreted.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, Nancy.
Aye.
Fro, aye. John?
Yes.
Sarah?
Aye.
Paul?
I want to abstain. I want to hear more information. I don't want to vote no. I want to abstain at this point. I want to hear more information before we actually vote.
Okay, Eve?
Yes.
Aye. Charles?
Aye.
Andrew?
Mine being abstained as well. I would want to hear what the actual project is.
Okay, and I am an aye. So that puts us in a situation where the proposal does pass. I don't remember that we've been divided often on proposals. We have been in the past. I remember when I first joined, there were proposals in which the committee, kind of disagreed. At the very least, we can ask Delia to come back. We can, tentatively put this as a full proposal for $550,000, and we can ask Delia to come back and just clarify for us some of our questions, if there is a way for her to do so. Would that be satisfying to Paul and Andrew? I want to hear your comments, Andrew.
The timing of my clarity would need to be after any public, like basically to firm up what exactly I'm voting on.
Okay.
And that's the only time that would be helpful for me.
Okay, so after she's had some town meetings and some public hearings. And Paul, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd like to be a yes on this, but I right now I'm uncertain what we're doing.
I think we all totally understand the articulate and thoughtful reservations that you and Andrew have both exercised. I think that we can express those to Delia and let her know that that we really, with both approval and some concern. Oh, is that all right? That we await what happens in the public hearings, and we hope those are as expedited as possible, well in advance of the town meeting. Does that make sense to everybody?
Just a clarification, can we approve this application with some caveats along the lines you're just talking about? What has a contingent on something?
You can reduce it later.
We can reduce it later. That wasn't the proposal, Paul. The proposal was that we fully funded, and that was passed 6-2.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that, but I'm asking, could that be a possibility? We haven't done final voting yet, right? This is a straw man vote.
It's not a strong vote, but this is our first 10. I mean, we do have another round. You're right.
Okay, so
And that's December 6th. Is it December 6th? What is that date? December 6th.
right, you're getting a sense of the committee through a vote. I'm just asking, can we attach some contingency, you know, I don't know what it would be, but so to
Yes.
raise the comfort level of at least cover this?
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Why don't you try to write a contingency and have it as a proposal for the next meeting?
Okay, we'll do.
But didn't we already discuss that at town meeting, we would be clear what we were voting, asking everyone to vote on if we took it to town meeting? Or I mean, I'm not sure. Are you talking about a contingency for us to vote on, or?
I think he is for a final vote. I think for the December 6th when we.
No. I'm thinking contingency built into and maybe it's just along the lines, and maybe it's just naive, but we have to have some before Diane takes us before town meeting.
Yeah.
We have to know what the project is. That would be my contingency.
Oh yeah, I think we agreed before that we would definitely, Diane wouldn't want to go to town meeting without having, you know, something in there around that. If I understood that correctly.
I'm just not sure we have to build that into our approval or not. I'll table that for now, Diane.
Okay, I think what we're hearing is two different approaches. One is we'll go ahead and okay this, and wait to see how it all plays out in the public hearing. And if in the public hearing or in other contingencies, we realize that we need to pull back the funding, we can do that. Alternatively, the alternative perspective is that we put some contingencies on it now, at the December 6th meeting, and that we make those contingencies clear in our warrant article itself. And I'm not sure we want to do that, but at any rate, that's an alternative that is presently being presented, or at least I'm understanding it being considered by.
Yeah, let me think about that, and I'll let you know whether I want to bring that up next time. Yeah, okay.
Very much. Okay.
Very briefly, can I?
Oh, of course, Nancy.
I would just like to point out that the uncertainty of the bids and the actual costs of some of these projects is going to be wild and crazy for projects across the board, I would think.
I do too.
So it's not unique to this proposal that they've seen outrageous.
Well, that there's the potential for.
I think there's potential for more craziness.
Right, but it might mean the whole project dies or not, lives or dies. This may be a live or die thing.
I mean, just as at our December 6th meeting, or perhaps in January, we need to retrieve the money from the West Concord, advisory committees on Junction Village. So we can't get it for this year, but we have another $200,000 right there that will come in next year that we can use depending on what happens to that Junction Village project. So we have that we need to recover at some point. But we have not taken it up as an item, but we shall at our next meeting. Okay, the town of Concord, can you pull up the chart again for us, please? And thank you. Okay, the town of Concord Public Works Cemetery restoration, $340,000. Do I hear a suggestion for that one?
Nobody?
Well, I was one of the deep divers, and I support this.
Thank you very much. Do I hear any reason not to? All right, let's pencil that in as $340,000. The Civil War Monument, $165,000.
Yes.
Yes.
1,000 times yes.
Yes.
Okay. The Historic Preservation Plan, for the Historic Preservation Committee. Do we hear $50,000 for that study?
Absolutely.
That was mine. Yes, please.
Here we go. The Town of Concord Archives Preservation of Historic Plans, Historic Preservation.
Also excellent.
Yeah, the lowest one we have.
Yes.
There we go. All right. And then staff and and technical support, that was mine, $40,000. I say bravo.
Yes.
Maybe increase that.
Well, I noticed there was 5,000 left over in looking at some of the work.
Wasn't that interesting last year? I don't know whether that has to do, I don't know why, John. I don't know whether it was Heather wasn't able to do something, or I was kind of confused about that.
Maybe it was printing or something like that. Yeah.
It could be.
One thing about this category is we way underfund this in terms of the maximum of 5%. And I think there's some very interesting things in the future this committee might think about doing with some of that administrative funding.
Thank you, Nancy. And when I recommended that we indicate more projects, Burton reminded me that there are plenty of signs around town. And so, Burton, I just want you to know, I've been noticing that.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
So,
anyway.
I wonder if we could scroll back up for 1 second to the Assabet project and possibly remove the 395 that was put there, only because I think Lee is coming back to put that 105 back in the proper place in his proposal, and we don't want anybody to see that number anymore.
Oh,
the 395.
I agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. And Anne, you have your hand up. Is there?
Yes. So just on the technical support, I did notice in looking at a housing plan that that the technical support or the administrative costs can also cover legal fees, and there may be more legal fees this year than there would in other years. So I don't know if that's something you all want to consider, or how those legal fees have been paid for in the past, but that is a possibility.
Interestingly, we have never had to pay them. It's been a question year after year that I've been on this committee, and we never get a bill. And it's usually just the town council's review of how the project fits with the statute. 1 year it was more complicated because of the religious organizations and some more complex legal questions. Yeah. But even that year, we never got billed. So.
That's exactly right. Oh, that's interesting. The town just absorbed.
I've always sighed with relief that we haven't been. So Anne, I don't know if that addresses your comment.
I just wanted to let you know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
I support the 40.
Yep.
Because it could happen.
I think we all do, at least the 40,000. So let's couple that in. Now, one of the things that, oh dear, now am I going to forget what I was going to tell you? Yes, I have. Never mind. So we are under the total amount, which is good. And the only question from my sensibility from our discussion is what we do about the Warner's Pond, in the sense that whether whether we fully fund that or put a caveat next to it or some sort of language next to it that says that all of this is contingent upon a vigorous public support. And if we decide to do it that way, I think that would be, I think that might be language with which the committee would be comfortable. Andrew, I see, maybe not. You want to explain that furrow brow?
Well, I just don't know how you measure that.
Right, but well, because I think she was going to have public hearings and then send out a survey and see what and come to some conclusion. You're right. I mean, there's no such thing in
right.
Everybody in the town getting together and there being we don't even all vote when there's a possibility to vote. So,
yeah.
But I mean, we don't even have, at least at the present moment, I don't think we have a very broad view of how that might be perceived. I mean, we know how people who have stakeholders who live near it and around it, but I don't think we know what people at large feel.
Yeah. I guess that's why I would almost want her to commit to a plan in the sense of saying, I've rallied the support. This is the plan. That's as opposed to saying we have an idea and I'll get the support because it's a condition of funding. Right. I mean, that's just my
No, and that's sensible, Andrew. I think, in candor, I think that Delia has said, and I don't believe I'm misspeaking in any public sense. She said she really thinks the dam should come down. So I
And
mean,
ecologically, it would be better, yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's how she feels, but she's not going to push that idea. I mean, she's going to listen, and that's the reason she really wants to get some community perspective before they go forward. So, okay. So we're forward we go, and I hope you all.
So what's the bottom line number? Sorry.
It is
It's 1847153.
18471.
No, that's available. I think we're a little under that.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah, it's
Oh, there we go.
39
Wait a minute.
680.
680.
Wait a minute. Where is it?
1839680.
Yeah.
1839. I'm not seeing it for 1839. What? I'm not seeing it.
680.
Oh, there it is. 680. Okay, sorry. Got it.
Now, last week I failed to ask us to vote after our very good discussion of the community preservation plan. And so I would like to hear a motion to support that which we discussed at considerable length last week and suggested changes to and comments about. We voted. So may I hear a recommendation from the committee or a motion from the committee to accept that plan?
I move to accept the plan, not this one, but the
other one, right.
Oh, sorry.
this preservation plan as edited and previously reviewed.
Thank you very much, Paul. Do I hear a second?
I'll
Second.
second that.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any further discussion about that? Okay, let's take a vote. Charles,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Nancy,
I
Sarah,
Aye.
Eve,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
Andrew,
Yes.
Burton,
Yes, thanks.
Paul. Did you already say aye?
Yes, aye.
Charles?
Aye.
Aye, okay, and I as well. It's a unanimous vote. As Concord says, I do so declare. Okay, now the Community Preservation Procedures Manual. I've had a chance to go over this with Anne very carefully. I hope you've all had a chance to read it. Are there any questions or recommendations for the change of language in the procedural manual? Anne has done something I think very smart. She has separated the procedures manual from the preservation plan work, so that if people want, in fact, they've got an absolute way of approaching this. It's been an exquisite editing job.
Diane, I sent my comments to Anne. I'm not sure how to discuss that. But
Thank you for doing that, Paul. Were they major or minor?
more clarifying comments in a couple of places. I think we should go over them. It's not now.
Absolutely. I mean, let's pull up the document and go over it.
not now. Maybe
No, I think we have to, Nancy. I know it's late, but
tonight.
I think we should go through it. It says Community Preservation's Manual Review.
No, I know, and I looked at it too, but I have some. Go ahead, Paul. I didn't mean to interrupt you. That was sort of a side comment.
And can you put up my comments as I emailed to you? Do you have that handy?
Let me dig out that email. Just one second.
I'm sorry.
Nancy, did you have minor or major changes you'd like to make in the document?
On page 20, I'm still hoping that site visits are not as completely eliminated as it appears.
I didn't think site visits were
On page 20.
Put them a week later than
It's I think it's especially important for site visits and input from members with areas of expertise to maybe be more on the job in looking at how a project is proceeding. So I think the language was close to being okay. It
Okay.
was something about as requested or something. I don't think it has to happen with the degree that the original had. Where are we seeing? At the bottom in yellow, is that it?
Right.
With the applicant to review at regular interviews and or when. Okay, it's in yellow. So is that your language? I'm having trouble seeing is that's orange underneath it. And under what category are we now?
Requesting.
Non-town, this is for non-town projects. What about, okay, let me just see.
So I just didn't think that we needed to require a site visit prior to releasing any funds to anyone. You know, I've had a lot of grants myself and that has never occurred.
And that's what the original language was, and I think I did not disagree with you on that.
Okay.
CPC will set up site visits with we'll set up site visits to what? I'm not seeing what's crossed out and what's still in. We'll set up site visits with the applicant to review the work to date, either at regular intervals or when reimbursements are requested following these site visits. They will CPC see that report then of the site visit? Sounds like.
I think that this is too stringent. That, as I mentioned, that
so these are crossed out, right? Some
yes,
of
they
this
are
is
crossed out.
So
But I
what?
wanted to highlight that because it is something that you all, that, you know, I wanted to talk about as well.
So I thought I saw it on this page, what the site visits were.
I don't think it precludes a site visit.
Well, I think it's
Require a site visit every time somebody applies.
no, I'm not arguing with that. I'm trying to find out how site visits were dealt with in terms of Ann's suggestions.
So I think I added CPC members or staff may request a site visit at any time.
Right.
But
Okay,
then it would not be
okay.
a requirement for reimbursement.
Add additional, depending on the type and scale. Okay, there it is. Okay, thank you. I must have been focused too much on the yellow. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Those are good comments. Paul?
Thank you, Diane. That's very good.
I had a number of, just in general, this is a procedures manual. Why are we referring to 2022 throughout the document? Maybe that's appropriate, but we have a 2022 timeline and a lot of 2022 dates. If this is going to survive more than 1 year, are all those dates appropriate? That's just a question for the group.
Right, I should update the dates for next year.
Oh, so you update them every year. Okay. So this is just for, because see the data, anyway, okay, you got my comment. Here on page 3, the language at the bottom of this paragraph, it should coincide with the, can you click on the box that I'm sorry, where are you?
Page 3,
No, I'm sorry, the page you were just on.
page 5. This.
Yeah, right here. Right above that, under recreation, there's language in the CPC plan, which needs to be added to that. It was the additional, remember I added additional comments to that? And,
yes, we can do that.
right, okay. On the reserve funds, this one just speaks to the real future property acquisitions. I think my comment there was, aren't there several reserve funds plus a general fund? Can we set aside for all 3 or 4 categories or just real property acquisitions? That was a question. I don't know. Because it just talks about real property there in reserve funds.
This was just this was something I did not change from the CPC plan at all, and it says to be used primarily for future real estate property real property acquisitions.
Maybe the board primarily is fine, because we talked about open space reserve fund earlier, so I don't know, that was a question. on
This
that.
is easily amended, Paul, and it's a good comment. After acquisitions, a comma, and or other perceived needs. And that because then that would cover all sorts of things. And give
Right.
the committee, so if you just put a comma after acquisitions and put in and or other perceived needs.
Okay. I'm not able to on this document for some
Yeah,
reason.
okay.
Okay, but I will.
Okay, I'm sure she's noted it. Those are good comments.
Then I think we're down on page 11. You can go down there. Under the, I think budgeting was a question there. And do we need to have something in detailed budgets that required?
So you would like to be more specific about the funding application?
Well, it might be number 4 may have a detailed cost estimate, so maybe I can withdraw that because maybe it's covered. I think you're right, Ann. If you go down, please.
And the other is just a date. Yeah.
Yeah, you said that.
That's again, the date issue.
Yeah. Okay, this one is, so the standard application process. I think some clarification as far as timing and coordination is really needed here. There's reference in here to the 6-month thing, which I don't think we want to state. We want to give departments enough advance notice. I don't think we want to adapt the 6-month thing. But so what I did is if you can click on the box in the first paragraph, this is a suggestion. It covers a couple of things. Let me read it. While community organizations and town residents are encouraged to generate ideas for projects and approach town departments and boards to become the authorized signatories on the applications, please be aware that projects involving town property require sufficient advanced coordination. So there was 2 parts to that. The sufficient advanced coordination, I want to replace the 6 months, because I don't know if every department's going to require 6 months, and I think NRC's admonition is probably not appropriate to bring in here. And the second, I want to just have a preamble which says, if we want people to generate ideas, but they have to approach town departments. So you can think about that one, but I think I want to accomplish a couple of things there by.
I thought we had taken that out, Anne. I thought we discussed not making it the 6 months. That we had said that town property require well in advance. Appropriate. I can't remember the word we used. I thought we had something different there.
We can make that change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to vary by department. We just need to encourage the applicants to approach the town departments early,
Right.
with sufficient and leave it up to that coordination. To figure
Sufficiently
out.
advance notice or something. I mean,
Yeah.
what I learned in talking with Anne is that the budgets are due months and months before. Before much less warrants are due in town meeting. I mean, they're doing it's in October that the departments are presenting their budgets.
Right.
People
So,
have.
so consider that comment there in number 2. So it says the first of these public meetings are going to be in June. That sort of defeats the purpose of sufficient advanced coordination. We kind of talked about that at our last meeting. When do we want to have that first meeting? But if we have the first one in June, it doesn't allow for a lot of advanced timing, I think, advanced notification.
Right, you would set new dates and we can put those new dates in instead.
So it's just a question whether 2 defeats the purpose of number 1 there. Right, do you understand the point?
Yes, absolutely. Got it.
I think the rest are really kind of minor comments on dates. And I think the rest of it, there wasn't anything substantive.
Before we move off that page, so that it says June 2022, but shouldn't we be having a 20?
That's what
No.
you, yes, I think that Anna's going to change all those.
Oh,
dates.
okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
That's okay, sir. Doesn't matter. But I mean, that's, you're right. And that's, and that's going to be changed.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I should know. I
yeah, I
should
know.
know. Oh, I'm sorry. You're done, Paul? I thought you were done.
No,
I
just
think the rest of it here is really minor
That's
date
fine.
comments and nothing more.
Thank you. I wanted to say one thing. Ann and I did we changed one thing in particular. Sometimes it's called CPC and sometimes it's called CPA. CPA is the act. This is a CPC committee. So we changed the language, which was rather, I would say, casual in the former document to be a little bit more accurate. So that was one of the many changes that she and I worked on. Okay, are there other comments or changes that anyone has seen or would like to make? Sarah?
I thought page 12 had a lot of question marks in it. I wanted to make sure we didn't miss that. Time frame question mark, initial.
Dates. Initial.
Notification is sent to applicants.
I don't know who put the highlighted, but maybe that was Anne.
Right, right.
Yeah,
That was me.
yeah.
I think that
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I guess if this is something that I'm supposed to be doing, I guess I would like to know when to do it. It seems like we're almost at that point, right? In December or January. That's when, do you typically let people know the initial funding recommendations?
Yeah, I would put time for colon and a small n, notification is sent to applicants of the initial funding recommendation decisions. Recommendation.
Is it January?
I would say in December, because that's usually when the warrant is due.
Okay.
Condition upon the applicant's receipt of matching funds. That's very specific.
Or upon any other matter, the CPC deems appropriate. The CPC may also ask for additional information at this time. You know, this is in advance of the actual December. You know, this is kind of this sets up a chance for us to do exactly what we've done in discussing things with not Delia, but with Lee Smith and the you know, and the Aspet River Bluff project.
Well, maybe we could say throughout the review period or something. I mean, because there's not a, because as you said, we may ask for additional information at any time, and that comes before.
That's gorgeous. Throughout the review period, notification is sent to applicants of the questions about funding recommendation decisions or something like that. How does that work, Sarah, for you?
Well, I don't actually feel strongly. I'm just noting that if we're thinking that we need to put in dates about when the final recommendations are sent, that sentence at the end is just in the wrong order. Does that make sense?
Right, I think that's why I questioned it.
Yeah.
And I don't think November 15th is right now. So a public hearing is currently scheduled. So.
Oh, yes, that was another piece I realized I wanted to highlight. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
So just simply a public hearing is held to allow CPC to receive public input on the proposed projects before recommendations are made for town meeting.
It turns out that the public hearing isn't required for this, that there's a public hearing required for changes to the plan, and the plan only needs to be updated every 5 years. So that's just by the act. So is that
Okay,
enough for tonight or?
send for 3 and 4. We will vote on this next time. Can you
Yeah.
changes for number 3 and number 4 to us for review?
Sure, yes.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
May I make a quick suggestion about this whole document with regards to the dates? I don't know if it's an appropriate time to do that super fast.
Go ahead, go Eve. Yeah.
I wonder, Anne, would it be easier if you just put like footnotes on these dates and just, you know, for example, the public hearing is currently scheduled for Tuesday, November 15th. Instead, have like the public hearing is currently scheduled, and then have like a 1 or whatever number you're up to, and then you could go to the chart, and we basically have this chart that you made, and you can just update all of the dates all at once in an appendix, and people can refer to the appendix for the dates. So you're not combing through this looking for dates all the time.
Yeah,
I don't
you
know.
What's the appendix?
Yeah, exactly. See
Sure.
appendix
Okay,
or something. I don't know
Mm.
what.
A public hearing will occur.
Yeah.
The appendix.
that's great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
That's a wonderful suggestion, Eve. Thank you.
So can we vote next week?
Yes,
Or,
we
I mean,
absolutely can, John. This is, you know, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry it's taken so long. I'm grateful for Anne's patience and everybody's willingness to read it. I've enjoyed learning a lot by reading it. So
I appreciate the time.
we'll vote on it next week. And please do take a moment to look at it before, or more than a moment, because it takes more than a moment to look at it before our next meeting.
And Diane, I was just reminded, how did the FinCom discussion go? Was there anything that came out of that we need to be aware of?
They voted for the
Okay.
town meeting. They approved that's what I was going to tell you. Now, what was it? Has something to do with the vote at FinCom? No, that wasn't.
Unanimous.
What?
It was unanimous.
What I wanted to tell you is that we won the Estabrook Woods project, Concord 1. And there's a day period during which the other side can challenge it, but the land court judge has voted in favor of the town. And this was announced last night at the select board. It's been up since November 24th. The document, it's about 86 pages. And that document has been available I think on the town website. I can't remember where I read it, but I think it was on the town website.
The judgment's only 2 pages.
The judgment beyond the whole process and everything else is rather lengthy. So,
Well, I'm sure we'll look forward to reading it in the Concord Bridge next week, hopefully.
you know, we're not getting it, which is really interesting. It's just not arriving at our house, so we're a little verklempt.
Oh, that's a shame. I really enjoy it.
I would too. I've had to scramble to get it from various places. Here a vote to approve the minutes of October 18th. They were very well done, incidentally, Anne.
I sent one change to Anne.
Thank you, John. What was that change, John?
Oh, it's a line that said that, where did it go? It's a line that said that I expressed concern about safety at that intersection, where I simply asked about it.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
I had no opinion.
Okay. Nancy?
I had a question under the Assabet River Bluff number 6 development, the 1, 2, 3, the 4th paragraph. 1, 2, 3, third line down, where it says the previous evening, the select board elected not to support the request from the Affordable Housing Trust. What was that from the trust, or was it from the Concord of Charles's group?
Exactly right. It was from the Concord Housing Development Corporation.
Is that, yeah, what should that, can we see that? Want me to read it again?
That's interesting. Can we all think about that for a minute? Linda, can you remember exactly who presented? I was so astonished by the whole thing. I kind of got lost in terms of who actually presented it.
Well, I'm going to be embarrassed if it was my husband. But I thought it was, I didn't think, I know Mike spoke, but
And
did they actually present the request?
I
Linda,
can listen to it again.
The select board failed to move the Christopher Heights project forward.
right,
They declined to take a vote.
that's exactly right.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in points of view, you might speak to Elise Woodward. She was she was very articulate at a town government committee meeting of the League of Women Voters on her feelings about that.
But I think what Linda said is what
Yes,
exactly.
that's what the
exactly
language
was.
should say. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, with those emendations in hand, do I hear a recommendation that we approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I hear a
Second,
E,
Yes.
Paul, Sarah,
aye.
John,
Yes,
Nancy,
I,
Charles? I'm seeing mouths move, and seem to be eyes. Burton,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and I agree, and I do so declare. That's a unanimous approval of the very fine minutes, Ann, that you took.
excellent, excellent.
Okay, thank you all very much. This is a long meeting and lots of hard work, and I'm very grateful for the thoughtfulness. You guys are fantastic. Linda, are we okay today? You want any comments?
You're more than okay. Excellent work as always.
Thank you. Okay. Well, you mean we've come up from our C plus? Yay. I know we don't. I know we don't have to vote to adjourn, but can I hear a movement to say we should approve the adjournment?
We did.
We did.
No,
Okay.
Oh, we didn't. You can declare, I thought.
I can declare it. So I declare.
Yes, you can.
Oh, wow.
I've been told.
Sure. Hey, thank you all. Fantastic. And we'll see you on December 6th. Bye.
Okay, good night.
Good
good
night.
night, everyone.